Hi guys, Todd here with Power Driven Diesel, and we're going to be doing an AFC Live question video here. We get a lot of questions, a lot of similar questions. We thought we could help you out by answering them, make it easier on you guys. Alright, so let's start with the first question. We get this a lot. I have installed an AFC Live just like the instructions say, but now I have less power than I did before. What's going on?
So usually the first thing that we've got to check on that is going to be the shutdown solenoid. That is usually comes out of adjustment when the AFC Live is installed because the AFC housing is moved. So we've got to make sure that that is adjusted correctly. To adjust it, there's an arm that attaches to the solenoid on the pump. Remove that arm, lift it up, use a rubber band, use a zip tie, something, zip tie it out of the way, go drive the truck, see if you've got more power. If you do, that means we need to adjust that thing. We want to adjust it so it goes all the way to the top, but is not still trying to pull up further than the top because the solenoid will then burn out quicker.
Another thing to check is make sure the AFC housing, when you modified it, is working correctly. Take a little piece of leftover tubing and hook the head right up to the AFC housing. If you got good power, then you know there's a problem with the AFC Live box. If nothing changes, there's something wrong with how you modified the AFC housing.
The other thing we need to definitely check is fuel pressure. So that is definitely related to lift pump issues, possibly fuel filter issues. That happens a lot more often than you would think. And a fuel bowl heater will sometimes get plugged. A lot of guys will actually take that fuel bowl heater system out of the loop of the fuel system. The other last thing that you really need to check, that you have a good overflow valve. That is necessary because it maintains pressure inside of the pump, the injection pump.
The next question we often hear is, I've installed my AFC Live and now my truck is too smoky.
So the first thing to check on this, if your truck is too smoky, is if your AFC housing is slid too far forward toward the radiator. If it is, it moves 3.5 millimeters from front to back. If you're all the way forward, you only have 19 millimeters of travel. You're using almost a quarter of that fueling all the time. So you need to move that back toward the firewall.
When I talk to people about the AFC housing, I tell them the position of the housing is your rough adjustment. This sets how much fuel you get before you receive any turbo boost. So your rough adjustment is where this positioned on the pump. Your fine tuning is the smoke screw. All this does is moves this foot here. The further this is forward, the more pre-boost fuel you'll have. So you can slide it forward or push it forward with this screw. So rough adjustment, move it, fine tune it with this screw here to get it just perfect, your pre-boost fueling.
The other thing that you need to take into account is that if you have bigger injectors or bigger delivery valves or even a maxed imbalanced pump, those things will all equal more fuel. And so you need to make sure that, like Todd said, that pre-boost needs to be backed out more than on a stock truck. The next question we've got. I installed the AFC Live, and now my truck does not start very easy.
Okay, it's a very common question, and that is, again, related to AFC housing position. When your truck starts, it slams that governor arm against the foot. If this is too far back, it's going to limit your fueling. So simply sliding this forward or sometimes screwing this in a little bit forward will get rid of that hard start issue.
Another thing that can cause a hard start issue, again, is with big injectors or big delivery valves. It will lower your idle. And so you need to make sure that that is adjusted correctly. You want to be somewhere between 850 RPM and 900 RPM.
So the next question we often get is, my max fuel switch isn't doing anything.
So the first thing to check on that is if you've played, before you install the AFC Live, if you played with the knobs, the red knobs, if that red knob is turned all the way clockwise, you've given it all the fueling that it can get, and that means that all the pressure that the boost is creating right now is in the AFC housing. So by switching that, we're not adding any extra pressure, it's only bypassing this setup here.
Another thing we've had a few people do, we want to make sure. This is the AFC foot, and it's oriented correctly. Some people, when they put in the AFC Max Travel Kit, they install this backwards. When this is backwards, it's always in a full power position, and that's why your switch doesn't work. That's why you can't reduce power or anything. Make sure this is pointing back towards your firewall, not towards your radiator.
Also, on that, If you don't have a foot, make sure you check this before you buy AFC Live. AFC Live will not work for you if you do not have a foot. So the next question is, I can't reduce the power on my truck. It's always at big power.
Okay, for that, make sure the switch is not down. Some people actually just the switch is down. They don't realize that's how it works. So switch up, then you can have the knobs in play to reduce power. Another thing is, again, that foot. If this foot's installed backwards, AFC Live will not help you. You'll always be at big power. Make sure the AFC foot is installed correctly. The switch is up towards the knobs, and you can turn that power down. Next question we get, what does the big red knob do?
So the big red knob that we've got right here, this one is our max fuel setting. What it's doing is just setting the amount of maximum fuel that we want the AFC to provide to the truck. So it's just setting how much that foot right here is going to move with pressure. Next question, what does the black knob do?
Okay, the black knob is the fuel rate control. So like Lennon said, the red knob controls how far forward this travels. The black knob controls how quickly it gets there. If it advances too fast, you have a bunch of black smoke that will clean up in the turbo lights. If it advances too slow, it's going to feel sluggish. So this allows you to tune in how fast it advances, so you have a pretty clean burn and a good responsive truck. Another common question comes in. I've installed AFC Live and it doesn't do anything. What can I do?
So the first thing to check is turn this black knob all the way clockwise. That's going to put it in like a valet mode. When it's in that valet mode, go and drive your truck. If it's very sluggish or slow or doesn't have any extra power, you know that the AFC Live is working correctly.
Another thing, make sure your switch isn't down. A lot of guys will push the switch down and they do the valves and nothing works. Remember, the switch gives you full fuel, the valves are not in play. For the valves to work, the switch points up towards the knobs, and now you can tune it.
The last one to check is to also run your red knob all the way out counterclockwise until you feel no resistance. Once you feel no resistance, then turn it back in about 2.5 turns. That's a really good starting point to start with. Once you're there, you can easily tune to where you need to be.
Next question we get, I already have a boost gauge. Do I still need a boost gauge on the AFC Live?
So this is not a boost gauge. This is an AFC housing reference gauge. What it's telling us is how much pressure is actually in the AFC housing. A lot of guys use this for tuning. They can usually use it to set for different loads on their vehicles.
All that being said, the reality is you do not need the gauge. A gauge is cool to have, but you can also tune via an EGT gauge. If your EGT is too hot, turn down that red knob because you have too much max fueling. If it's not hot enough, you want more power, turn it up. So the gauge is more of helps a tuning guide, but you do not technically need it if you don't want it.
So next pretty common question we get is, my AFC Live gauge is not working.
Usually what happens when your gauge doesn't work is you have it turned to full power mode. When this is in full power mode, switch down, just pretend this isn't here. It's not going to work at all. It may give you some funky readings, just pretend they're not there. Once this is back up, then the gauge should function properly. So make sure your switch is up if you want your gauge to work properly. The next question we get is, what max treble spring should I get with my AFC Live?
So this is all boost relative. Most of the time on a stock truck, we say stock to about 25. You should get our stock to 25 or 30 PSI max travel kit. The next one we get is usually a stock truck with like a boost elbow. That one's going to be a 30 to 35 PSI. Our next one would be an aftermarket turbo. That would be like a 362 SXE or something similar to that. That one's going to be our 35 to 45 pressure spring. Now, if you've got a turbo that goes over that 45 in a single setup, still run that 35 to 45 spring. In a compound setup, you're going to want to run our 45 to 60. Now, 60 is not where we're limited. It's just where we put the cap.
One thing to remember about the max travel kits is we made these because the stock spring is too short. What happens is as it advances, this will collapse. It'll coil bind. It'll limit your fueling. You can make this real loose, which is great, but that's going to make it real hard to control your smoke. So all these springs are a little bit longer. That enables you to have your low-end smoke control without limiting your top-end fueling. That's why we developed the Max Travel kits. Our next question. If I upgrade my turbo in the future, will I be able to use my AFC Live or do I have to buy another one?
So our AFC Lives are actually set up to work with any setup. The only thing that changes is our installation kit. If you have a stock turbo, we supply fittings specifically to install your wastegate. That is the only difference between an AFC Live stock and an AFC Live aftermarket.
Also, if you have a stock turbo and you upgrade your turbo, you may need to get a different Max Travel kit to get your spring in the proper boost range that you will go up to when you upgrade your turbocharger. But as far as the AFC Live, it will work for everything.
Another pretty common question we get is, will AFC Live work with my 13 mil pump or a maxed imbalance pump or even a non-Dodge application?
So the AFC Live will work with any P-pumped diesel engine, whether that be a bus, a motorhome, or a truck. It'll also work on a 13 millimeter pump, a 12 millimeter max imbalance pump. What you got to realize is the AFC Live gives you control completely from minimum setting to maximum setting on the fly. It cannot go below the minimum or above the maximum. It just gives you that total range of control in your truck. So if your low-end fueling is still very aggressive because you have a 13 mil pump with some monster injectors, you really can't tune that out because that's the minimum of the pump. You're still going to have to drive with your foot. But it will give you the range you can control on the fly while you drive. Another question we're frequently asked is, will the AFC Live work on my first-gen VE pump truck?
So that question is a good question that we get all the time. The answer is yes, it will work on your truck, but it will not function the same way that it does on a P-pump truck. It will not add any extra fueling. It will only limit it. The majority of your fueling is coming from the fuel screw that is not related to the AFC housing on a VE truck.
So like London said, we cannot add any power with AFC Live to your VE truck. If you happen to have a big pump that's been modified, maybe you have some high EGT or excessive smoke, we can limit that with AFC Live, but if you're looking for more power, this will not help you. Well, that's going to wrap up this video with AFC Live questions. I hope it was helpful to you. If you're new around here, feel free to subscribe and give us a like. We're going to be doing lots of these videos and take videos in the future. Hope to see you soon. Thanks.